Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Toe Tags Metal Reviews, and today we're going to be reviewing the new album from Orbit Culture titled Nija. So we've listened to this album for a week non-stop, and I'm going to take the floor and say that this album was very impressive. Now, our first impressions, we were just kind of caught by surprise. We were not expecting it to be as good as it was. Now, did it stand the test of time for me? The answer is yes. I think this album is great. I think the rhythms are really cool. Specifically, Day of the Cloud. There's a really interesting thing that happens here. It happens, I guess, near the end of, near the end of each verse, or it's part of each verse, where it's like, oh wow, what are they doing? It sounds like something totally awkward happening timing-wise, and it feels like they're skipping a beat or something. And I remember you said in our listening session, oh, it might be 7, and I listened to it, and I think it is in 7/8. And I'm pretty sure what throws you off is that the drummer is starting his quick double kick on one of the upbeats.
Right.
Which is not, quote unquote conventional. You're so used to hearing downbeats and feeling totally rooted in that.
Sounds wrong in your ear.
Exactly. So when you hear something totally off-putting, it confuses you. But I think it is in 7, which is really interesting. Like, that specific thing kept standing out to me throughout the week, and I was trying to figure out what is it, and then I figured it out. I'm like, wow. It's not even that complex of a thing, but it's super duper interesting in how it was done. And speaking of the drummer, he's phenomenal, man. I mean, we talked about him last week. I'm going to talk about it a little bit again, just how impressive and clean everything sounded and how fruitful it sounded. I think you either mentioned it in our first impressions or we talked about it in our listening session, probably both, but it's a really good mix of a lot of density, but not too much.
Right.
Because you do find a lot of drummers with more extreme metal and more, really dense music that they're just pretty much like
just going ham the whole time.
They're going crazy and they're just kind of doing just one wall of noise, which
this is broken up very well.
Exactly. It's put in the right spots, and that's awesome because that shows the versatility of this player. Like, he can do a lot of stuff, but he can also do more minimal stuff when he needs to.
I agree, and I also think the marriage between the drumming and the guitars is actually a highlight of this album as well. Because I heard things on this album that I can't say I've never heard it before, but it stood out to me. Like, you'll hear a lot of bands do, like, when the guitars are doing chugs, the bass is doing like triplets or whatever on the feet as well, on the drums, kind of matching each other and kind of going in sync. In this, in like North Star of Nija, for example, there's a part where the guitar is doing chugs, but the double bass is going straight through, and it almost sounds like they're going in sync, but they're not. They're doing separate things, but they're married so well together that it just sounds super tight and super clean, and it kind of stands out as something like, whoa, that's kind of cool. Most bands don't do that. They kind of do like the triplets together or whatever, the triplet chugs together. So I like stuff like that. That's really cool as well.
Yeah, I noticed a bunch of moments where they were in unison and they were not.
Yeah.
Like, it was mixed up really well.
Yeah, which is really cool. So yeah, the drumming, like, you can talk about the drumming all day probably, because every song has phenomenal drumming. And I would say the guitar riffs are actually pretty good too. None that really stood out to me, like, where I went, oh wow, this is like a crazy riff, but these guys know what they're doing. Like, they don't write generic riffs to the, I mean, maybe they are kind of generic, I don't know. They're nothing super spectacular, but they sound good. They hit the right spots, and they get your head banging and they just get you pumped up and stuff like that. It's really like energetic music.
For sure.
And to me, that's what I want. So
yeah, I found a lot of points on this album where they would just totally go with something and it would just feel crazy. Like, perfect pit music. Like the ending in North Star Nija, or Behold, or the entirety of Open Eye. Like, I totally find that it's such a great mix of super crazy stuff and not as crazy stuff. And I think Behold and Rebirth are perfect examples of that. It starts out a lot more relaxed, and then by the end, they totally go nuts with it, and it's awesome, and it's a cool build-up.
Yeah. To bring this maybe down a little bit, which I hate doing, but it's a review, we gotta talk about stuff. This album is basically, like we mentioned, the first impressions, written, produced, and everything by one guy. Like, he's got his band with him, but everything was kind of just like one guy, the centric guy, does all the planning, and everything's this one guy who's the lead singer. That shows a little bit, because you get a lot of songs, and TV Fish just actually pointed this out to me and showcased before we started recording this, where they reuse a lot of things. They reuse a lot of melodies or maybe rhythmic patterns or vocal phrasings, things like that. And things like that are usually things we shun albums for because it means that the album might kind of lack a little creativity. However, it didn't really feel like that listening to this album throughout the week. Because listening to this, I'm like, I think this album is great. I think this album is super solid from beginning to end. But I was having trouble really finding a lot of things that stood out. And I was finding that a lot of the songs did kind of blend in with each other, but I didn't really put two and two together until TV Fish showed me like, hey, look at this, look at that, look at this. They're all kind of very similar. And I'm like, well, maybe that's why. That's obviously why I was thinking that. So it's kind of a downfall, but it didn't really feel like a downfall.
But, okay, well here's the thing about this melody that I mentioned. From Open Eye onwards, you listen to the melody and the vocals, and it is really similar for most of those songs. Like, you'll find that recurring thing. I feel like it's either a double-edged sword, or I'm not sure what I think about it. And what I mean by that is, of course, you don't want to hear the reuse of assets. You want to hear something new, interesting, different every song. But if it's a concept album where everything is connected, it makes perfect sense to recapitulate and recap the same memory, same melody.
Perhaps we're just forgiving it because it just sounds really good.
Well, it does sound
good. You know what I mean? Like, we're just like, yeah, whatever.
The thing is, if it is all connected, then it makes perfect sense to do that. But if it's not connected, then it's like, well, what the heck? You're doing the same thing over and over. But I don't know if they're connected. I mean, I know
Nija, Rebirth, and The Shadowing are allegedly connected, so it would make sense for those three songs to have similarities and things that join them together.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Open Eye and Mirror Slave also joined them, maybe?
I don't know.
Maybe. We don't know for sure, but it doesn't feel like it hurts the album. You know, there are some albums where it really does reuse the same kind of things over and over and it feels bothersome, but on this album it didn't feel bothersome. I feel like it's fine. Even though it is something I did notice somewhat early on in the week, it didn't really bother me. I thought about it like, does this bother me? I don't know. And if it's connected, then it doesn't really bother me. But, you know, why would thinking of that really change my opinion? If I can listen to it and it doesn't bug me, then it's fine.
Yeah. You mentioned Mirror Slave a second ago. I want to talk about that a little bit because it became my favorite song on this album. Namely due to the chorus. The chorus of this song is super catchy and super well done. It's got the, I hate doing this comparison, but it's got the James Hetfield vibe to it, which several of the songs do. This guy's definitely James Hetfield influenced. You can definitely hear that. I hear Matt Heafy in there as well, which I mentioned in the first impressions, but mostly James. And he definitely has his own style too. He's not a complete ripoff or anything like that, but the chorus of Mirror Slave and the whole song as a whole really just started captivating me throughout the week and grew to my number one very fast and stayed there. Some other highlight songs, Behold, North Star of Nija was one of my top song in the first impressions, and the intro song at the front is also a really good song. I will say there's one song in the album that I do not like, and that is Rebirth. This song, it's one of two kind of slower-ish songs. It's the slowest song on the album. I was skipping it a bunch, but then I realized that the second half of the song is actually pretty dope. So it's like this catch-22 with me, like, do I skip the song and miss the good part at the end, or do I put up with this 2.5 or whatever, 3 minutes of crap I don't like and hear the ending? And speaking of the ending of that, that's the ending that has that, it sounds like if the Imperial March was written by a metalhead, then that's what it would sound like, which I think is badass. But yeah, I'm conflicted on that song because it's like 50% good and 50% shit in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it's a bit of a stain on the album for me.
Well, with that being said, I think it's time for us to get to ratings for this album. And I'm gonna rate it first. So this album for me, honestly, was super enjoyable throughout the week. Like, the entire week, I put it on loop. It was just awesome. Like, it's not, I can't really think of many things about this album to complain about, really. Like, the only thing is that, okay, they kind of reused that melody in the second half. That's really it. The riffs are cool. It hits super duper hard. There's a lot of variety to the songs. It gets a toe tag. Like, it's just an awesome album, just front to back.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this album too. And like I said a few minutes ago, like, listening to this album, I find myself like enjoying it, but I'm having a hard time picking out little special moments. I think the reason why I was having trouble finding in little special moments is because the whole album is actually special. Like, it's written very well, it's performed very well. There's a lot of diversity in the sound. I'm not that familiar with Orbit Culture's previous discography, but I would bet that these guys stepped it up from their previous albums. But yeah, this gets my toe tag. I think other than Rebirth, which is probably my only real stain on this album, I think it's solid from beginning to end, and yeah, I think it's a deserving 2 toe tag album.
Well, there you have it, 2 toe tags for Nija. Guys, I just want to thank you guys for requesting this album as much as you did. I don't think I've ever seen an album requested for us as much as this
Or
one.
hyped up this much too.
Yeah, this is like, everyone was telling us about how insane this album was, and it totally showed in the week that we listened to it. So thank you guys for requesting this album for us. It was great, and it deserves 2 toe tags. Anyway, that's all we got for you today. Remember to like the video if you liked it. Comment, tell us in the comments below. I mean, what do you think of the album? It's been out for over a month now. We're sure you guys loved it. We loved it too. Anyway, guys, subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. I'm TV Fish.
And I'm Vile Self.
And we'll see you guys later.